Technology Manager for the Spider line of products, and my associate here is David Saffir, who's been presenting for us for well, this and the last series of webinars. He has an interesting topic today. He's doing color management for indoor photography, which kind of covers the classic color management issues, but emphasizes how they deal with indoor photography issues. So I'm looking forward to hearing this one myself. Before we get started, let me say welcome to our co-sponsor, MyPix2 members here, and I hope that you will all turn on your GoToWebinar control panel and open up the questions section, because in the questions section I will be answering questions as best I can while David Saffir is presenting. Now we will have offers and specials at the end of the webinar, so you can stay tuned to have an opportunity for those. And without further ado, I'll turn you over to David Saffir, our California-based professional photographer and photo educator who's been working all week on getting this presentation ready for us. I'm looking forward to seeing it. So hello, David.
Hi, David, and thanks. This is David Saffir. I'm a professional photographer and printmaker. I live near Los Angeles. I imagine that I'm not going to be able to talk about the weather without annoying some of you. I'm sure that's it's pretty rough out there in some places, and I'm sorry for that. But we'll try to make today interesting. We're going to talk about color management for indoor photography, and that's a topic that might seem a little bit counterintuitive in the sense that, well, we've got lights inside, so what's the problem? Well, the problem is the lights inside and the different color temperatures and the different configurations and sometimes even colored lighting. Also reflections and color casts from colored materials and things like that. In fact, this photograph on the front page of the slide deck of the presentation is a great example. And the photographer who took this picture is Ed Ouellette. He's a nationally known commercial photographer. He's also in Los Angeles, a good friend of mine. One of the real challenges in this photograph was the color from the floor, and you can see there's a lot of light coming in from the side, and it's bouncing off the floor. And Ed's big challenge here was to keep the brown color cast from affecting the clothing and the skin tones of the people in the image. And the way he did that, just for your information, is there's a bank of strobes with umbrellas on them from left to right all the way across behind the camera. And the camera's sort of in between two of the umbrellas. And so he flooded the room with light to overcome some of the color issues of the greens and blues coming in through the windows on the left and the brown coloring on the floor and some of the other decorations like the red couch and things like that, where it's not really red, it's sort of a indescribably purple color. I can't really find a word for it. Anyway, he had a lot to overcome, and the way he did that was, I wouldn't call it brute force. There's a lot of subtlety. It's very evenly lit, but the main thing is that he overcame the color issues by using indoor lighting of his own. Now let's go to the next page. There we go. So one of the things about color management indoors is that simplicity is the key to success. You have to think about the light and the environment. You have to think about the light that you're getting from, say, overhead lighting, side lighting, windows, artificial lights, those kinds of things, and the environment. The walls are painted a certain color, the ceiling's painted a certain color. A cute little story is early in my career I discovered the hard way that a painted ceiling is not your friend. I was bouncing on-camera flash off of a yellow ceiling and got back and had pictures of people that looked pretty yellow themselves, and they really weren't supposed to be. Their clothing was yellow. Everything was affected by this bounce from the ceiling. And so you've really got to look at your environment and understand how the light is bouncing around and what it's going to be doing to your image. It's important to get it right in the camera. The old saying, we'll fix it in Photoshop, I'm sure by this point everybody knows that that's a lie, that fixing it in Photoshop is always 5 times harder than anything you could do in the field or in the studio. And that includes your exposure. Exposure has a lot to do with what your color is going to do later. and dynamic range and all of those things, are getting all of those right, getting your highlights right, getting your shadows right, getting your midtones right, all affect how your color renders and how your image looks when you give it to your client or your customer. Very, very important, particularly when you're dealing with an outside print service provider, but really in any circumstance, is to manage your display. You have to understand something. It's absolutely critical. Virtually no display ships from the factory in a good color calibrated state. That means that it's going to show up on your desk or in your studio. It's going to be too bright. Inevitably, it's going to be too bright for photography, and it's typically going to be too blue, and that's inherent to the way a lot of these displays are made, that they have an inherent blue tone to them. Some of them are just set that way because they want them to look good on the showroom floor. They want them to be really bright and really saturated and typically really colorful, so they turn everything up to maximum and ship it out, and it turns out that that's usually too bright and too blue. Color accurate image editing. It's important that what you're looking at on the screen is what you're going to get when you make your print, and that includes when you're working with a desktop inkjet printer or you're working with a print service provider like mypix2.com. You have to be thinking ahead and understand that there actually are ways to set up your software. I'm going to show you how to do that, where you can get an accurate preview of what your print's going to look like while you're doing your image editing, and it's in real time. You want to get controlled, accurate, and consistent printing. That would mean either having a color calibrated workflow for your own printer or working with a print service provider that has their color under control. And all this adds up to efficiency, cost, and quality. You're looking for the quality part of it. I think is a given. I think sometimes efficiency goes out the window in the quest for quality, and that people think that they can't have both. I think you can absolutely positively have both. And a color managed workflow, typically you shouldn't have to make more than one proof print of any job. That once you get the color locked in, that the whole job should flow very easily and quickly. And a color calibrated workflow is always more efficient and predictable. That means that you're spending more time behind the camera making money and less time struggling with your computer at your desk. Now, I included this shot. This is an ambient light shot. It's just a snapshot. I've got a couple of snapshots in here along with the professional level photographs. This is one of my favorite pictures, actually. David Toby, this may resonate with you. This is from one of the trips to Barcelona with Hewlett-Packard. And we're in a little roadside restaurant that has this dining room that's in a well in the wine cellar. And it's lit, and you can see at the top, if you follow my mouse cursor, you can see that there's at least 2 different kinds of lights here. There's probably 3 or 4 off camera. And it made it a very difficult lighting situation. It would really have been great to have what we call spider cube, which is a black, white, and gray, I guess you'd call it a polygonal shaped, sort of a gray card on steroids. We'll show you one in a minute. So I could have color neutralized this photograph, because you can see that there's a range of color tones being injected into the photo. In the middle here, we've got a really nice bright white, but over here on the edges with the other lighting, it's really quite yellow and incandescent looking. It looks nice and warm and inviting, but the color certainly is not accurate. So it's about the light in the environment, and ambient lighting is not always controllable. It's always an issue. How do you balance off your lighting with the ambient lighting? Now look at this photograph, which was taken by John Walrath, who's a colleague of mine. Very, very good strategy of his. He used on-camera flash with a diffuser. You can see it's nice and soft and giving a really nice rendering of skin tones and skin texture. But he's working in a reception hall. Look at the lighting that's bouncing off the ceiling. It's very, very blue, lots of magentas, lots of oranges. Can you imagine what this would look like if he had taken the picture the way I took this picture? This image here would be, she would be orange and magenta and goodness knows what else. And instead, because he used the on-camera flash intelligently that she looks great, and I'm sure she loved this photo. And so diffuse flash used here was intended not only to illuminate the subject, but to control the quality of the light and the color that he was rendering in his image. So he got it right in the camera. I'm sure he had to do very little to this photograph when he got back to the studio. Now the exposure settings, I'm not going to get into the details of this, but a lot of the cameras that we have nowadays and the flash units that we have nowadays have extremely accurate automatic flash settings, usually called TTL. It's through the lens metering, and you can use those to get your exposure, really nail your exposure. And of course, since the flash is color regulated, they're all running at color balance of neutral daylight. They're going to control the color temperature or the color or the influence of color from other light sources quite well. I strongly recommend that you shoot RAW. If you have to have JPEGs right away, shoot RAW plus JPEG. We all have memory cards now that are quite big. They've gotten much less expensive. Storage space is not the big issue that it used to be. So do shoot RAW every time you go out, because it makes it much easier down the road to both color manage the image and to edit it. Now we have a poll. We're going to ask 3 questions. Each question will be asked individually. The first question is, do you use auto white balance on your camera when you're shooting indoors? Okay, so the balance on that, the percentage saying yes was about 60%, and the percentage saying no was about 40%. The next question is, do you use an ordinary gray card for color balance when shooting indoors? Now that's very interesting too. The answer was 28% said yes and 72% said no. And we're going to come back to that topic a little bit later on, because I think there's some issues that you need to hear that are going to help you very much with both image quality and color control. And the last question for the group, do you use a color chart for camera profiling? Yes or no? And it looks like the answer to that stabilized at about 25% saying yes and 75% saying no. Thanks very much for helping us out with that. Now this is not an outdoor photograph. I wanted to reinforce the point I made about using supplementary lighting to control color. When I set this image up outside, this is a family group, of course. You can see there's a baby in the picture, and there's a grandmother, and all the siblings and that kind of thing. Lot of range of skin tones. Fortunately, I was able to get people to harmonize their outfits for the most part. But the big problem I had was that even though it was an overcast day, they're surrounded by greenery, and so everyone looked green. They all looked like Kermit. And I quickly realized that I was going to have to supplement the lighting. And what I did was I said right and left, I set up 2 fairly powerful strobes with big umbrellas on them. And I used about 20% intensity and filled in so that at least the skin tones would render accurately. And it eliminated the green color cast, made things much easier in post-production. I didn't have to do a lot of image editing in post for this customer and get the images out on time. And so you can use studio strobes or on-camera flash to balance foliage colors as well. So even though it's not an artificially lit environment, it's a little tip for you to take with you after you leave this webinar. Now you can also use ambient light indoors. Very, very effective. This is just a snapshot. Cute couple. They live up in Nevada, some friends of mine. And I just used a north-facing window. It's a little bit hot on her cheek, but it still gives you the idea that the color was very well balanced. We've got good catch lights in the eyes from the window. nice skin tones, not too much texture, but enough to give it dimensionality and believability. And it was a very easy exposure. I just used aperture priority in the camera and daylight balance setting for white balance, not auto white balance. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But you can see we have a blonde and a brunette together, and it harmonized extremely well. Daylight is really the color temperature that your camera is set to use, and so anytime you can get closer to daylight color temperature, the better your image is going to look. Now, let's talk a little bit about the white balance settings on your camera. You know, talk about getting it right in the camera. You've got a number of white balance settings presets, I call them. And you can see on the lower left, and here comes my mouse cursor, it's right here. We've got incandescent, flash, direct sunlight, etc., and it provides a color temperature. And those are very, very convenient. They're nice. You can quickly go to an approximate color temperature and get yourself in the ballpark. And so for a quick shot, yeah, it can serve you quite well. But having said that, they are still approximations. What you really want is to get it as close as you can to the exact color balance, or the exact color temperature, excuse me, in the room. One of the things you want to do is be shooting raw files. You can use our spider cube in two ways. One of the ways that you can use the spider cube is to fill the frame, and you can see this white balance button on the camera. You push the white balance button, fill the frame with the spider cube, and then press the shutter button, and it will white balance the camera to the lighting conditions present at the time the shot is taken. Now, that kind of custom white balance can also be done with an accurate gray card, and we'll talk again a little bit about that later on when I talk about the Spider Checker product. But you can reset this for each situation. It's much more accurate than using the approximate white balance settings. If you have the time, it's a great way to go. You can also include the spider cube in your shot and go back later on with the gray or white color correction eyedropper and neutralize color in the photo. And I have an illustration of that for you in a little while. And here it is. This happens to be Capture One Pro, but this operates the same way in Lightroom, in Aperture, in Photoshop's Adobe Camera Raw, or Photoshop adjustment palettes like curves and levels. There's a gray or a gray balance or a white balance eyedropper. In this case, it's right here. You would go to the brightest side of the spider cube, which indicates where your primary light source is, and you would color balance the photograph there and neutralize any color cast that you might have. Now, you can also calibrate your camera with the Spider Checker. Spider Checker has 24 color patches. They're near or within what's called the sRGB color space, which is a standardized color space that's used by a lot of devices. And you can achieve maximum performance from your camera with this device. You take a photograph of the Spider Checker in even, balanced light, no dark corners, no hot spots, no shiny spots, and you shoot it in RAW. And you're going to import that raw file into our software, and it will generate a preset for applications like Lightroom, Photoshop, and Hasselblad Focus. And there are other applications being added as we speak. You also can use this as a reference. In some photographs we have obviously the sRGB primaries, we have some intermediate colors, we have gray ramps, and we have 3 white tints and 3 near black tones. And some skin tone patches. And so you can use this as a reference later on. For example, you could take this as the first in a series of photographs, use it to profile the camera, but also use that when you send your images to your print service provider or you send them to your own printer, print a picture of the Spider Checker and then compare that to the image on screen, provided you have a calibrated display, and away you go. The color calibration with the Spider Checker, very straightforward. You import the picture into the software, which runs on your desktop. You use these handles to straighten it out so that these square indicators are centered in each one. You may wind up cropping it a little bit or straightening it out a little bit. And you can save it to Lightroom or save to Adobe Camera Raw. And that becomes a preset, and that preset can be applied in Camera Raw, or you can apply it as you normally would as a Lightroom preset. And that's going to give you very, very good color calibration for your camera. These panels can be flipped around. I'm going to go back a couple of slides. You can see this frame actually unfolds, and you can take these panels out and replace them, or you can flip them over, and on the back side you have these gray cards and gray to black ramps. I use this a lot for setting custom white balance. It's a little bit easier to handle than the Spider Cube. I have both. And I use these to set white balance in the camera for both still photography and for video. Very, very handy tool. Now let's talk about one of the most important things that you can do for yourself in terms of productivity, efficiency, accuracy, you name it. Most new displays are not calibrated. They come out of the box, they're too bright, they're too blue. It's a big problem. I get technical support calls every day about how to handle this. And what we have here is called the Spider Pro 4. We have this Spider 4 Elite, and these. Just hang on one second, please. This is a device that has a sensor. It has 7 color sensors in it. It's going to use the software. It's plugged in via USB cable. It's going to use the software to display a series of standardized color patches. It takes about 10 minutes. And it's going to read each color patch. It's going to determine whether or not that color patch is right on or it needs to be corrected. And it's going to record those results in a little lookup table that it saves, and it uses that the video card uses that lookup table to correct your color. Now at the end of the day, the biggest complaint that I get from people is that their prints look darker than their display. And what they don't know is that this also is controlling the brightness of your screen. It's set up to control whether the screen is darker or lighter. And that's very important, because if the screen is too bright, you're editing the image, you're going to edit that image down so it looks good to you on the screen. And then you're going to send that off to, say, MyPix, or you're going to send that to your printer, and the print is going to look too dark. That's the most common complaint that we get from people, even after they've calibrated the display. And so you really have to watch the brightness of that. And here's the recommendations for calibration settings, regardless of which calibration device that you're using. So this is the screen for the Spider 4 Elite. There's 3 basic settings. Gamma, which is loosely defined, can be referred to as contrast. The white point, Gamma 2.2 is the standard. The white point at 6500K is neutral daylight. And the brightness level at 120 really requires that you're working in a room that is lighting controlled. That means you can't have a bright sunny window while you're working on your photographs. You have to pull the curtains. You can't have bright overhead lights. If you're working in an office environment where you can't turn the bright overhead lights off, at least get a hood for the display so you have some protection. But the fact is that the display should be the brightest thing in the room. It really should. I can't say that enough. It should be the brightest thing in the room. First of all, because your color vision is going to adapt to whatever is the brightest thing in the room, whether it's the window, or it's the wall behind your display, or it's the lighting overhead, or it's the display itself. But at 120, or in that neighborhood, you've got a really good shot at getting a good screen-to-print match in terms of brightness or luminance. Typically, these monitors come out of the box, they're set to 200, which is almost double the recommended level. So I'm sure you can understand what I'm talking about here, is that getting the brightness level down is just as important as the white point, which is basically your color temperature, and the gamma level. Now, there's another issue that I think is very important. This is a tool that's available in both Lightroom and Photoshop and color managed applications. And this is what I call a live color preview, and Photoshop and Lightroom call soft proofing. Now the term soft proofing is, not really part of common vocabulary. It's a holdover from the old days of 4-color press. In any event, the way this works is that you'll be able to see, based on the paper that you think you're going to be printing on, and I'm talking now about inkjet printing, but you're going to be able to see what your print's going to look like while you're editing it. So if you're making levels or curves adjustments or vibrance adjustments, saturation adjustments, you'll be able to see what that end result is going to be. You're going to go to View, to Proof Setup, and go to Custom. And when you click on Custom, you're going to see this window pop up. And you can pick a device to simulate. You can actually pick a color space, like sRGB, if you're sending out your work to a printer that demands sRGB, then you can do that, or you can set it to a paper type. And in this case, I'm using a Baryta photo paper, a fine art paper. And once you click Preview, the screen is going to show you what that print's going to look like when while you're working in real time. I can't emphasize enough how important that is. It's going to show you the destination before you ever get there. And you can make a change, and you can see, oh, that's a little bit too much, back off a little bit, or it wasn't enough, add more, et cetera, et cetera. And so you get an instant feedback loop that really improves both your efficiency and eventually your image quality. The way this works in Lightroom, it's the same in Lightroom 5 as it is in Lightroom 4. In the Develop module, you would see at the bottom a tick box for soft proofing. You can click on that. You can go Command or Control S. Okay, and then you would see up here, soft proofing would be enabled. You'd see it above your histogram. And you can see here that you've got the same tool that you had in Photoshop. You have a drop-down that's going to have all the color profiles that are on your computer. You can go ahead and select that color profile, pick a rendering type, perceptual or relative. Typically, I use perceptual. A lot of people prefer relative or relative colorimetric. It's really a matter of taste. The picture police will not come to your house if you experiment with this, I promise. So you can try any one of those, and you can see the results in real time. I'm trying to get the picture to flip. Now, what about black and white? Good question, isn't it? There's a number of ways to get to black and white. I think probably the worst way to do it is to set your camera for black and white and just shoot in black and white. I have a friend who uses a compromise, which is he's shooting RAW plus JPEG, and he has a Canon 5D Mark III, so I'm not sure if this is available on all digital cameras. But on his camera, what he does is he shoots a RAW, which doesn't really have any color corrections made to it at all. A RAW picture is a RAW picture. It's not even a picture, it's a collection of ones and zeros, and it's not a photograph until you process it to a TIFF or a JPEG. But he sets the JPEG to render as a black and white, so he can view that on camera and get an idea of what he's getting. What I use is NIC Silver Effects Pro 2, and I'll convert that color photograph to black and white. I find that I have more control over the nuances of shading and tone, and then if I send that off to be printed, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to get. Now, MyPix Pro 2 also in their design studio has a conversion to black and white and also to sepia tone, which is worth trying. But I typically will go from color to black and white myself and then send it off to be printed. You have to pay very close attention to the tonal range. The tonal range really starts with the highlights, and you can see here we're right on the edge, on the bridge of our nose of being too bright. We have a small specular highlight here, which really should have been edited out, but it's not awful. And we've held the detail in the cheekbone, which is very important. Now she has very, very dark hair, and on screen here, as a rendered JPEG, it's pretty hard to see the details. In the RAW file, you can actually see the texture in her hair. But it's important to hold the texture, and we've got good lighting here. We've got a very, very nice semicircular highlight that accentuates her bangs and the curve of her forehead, so it really helps make the photo. And then we've got really nice mid-tone transitions. And this is where people fall down a lot when they're converting from color to black and white, is that they pay attention to the highlights and the shadows, but the mid-tone transitions like this, transition from the highlight on her cheek, on the cheekbone down to the side of her cheek, they don't pay enough attention to those when they do their conversions. And similarly here, you'll see very sharp pixelated gradations in the cheekbone instead of this nice smooth shadow. And they lose a lot of the feeling and the dimensionality of their black and white photos. So when you're doing your black and white conversions, really pay attention to the tonal range. Now, as far as sepia tone or tinting goes, that's a matter of taste. It's a matter of your personal preference. I would add one cautionary note to that, is that it's easy to go too far. It's better to start off with something that's subtle, almost barely noticeable. Sepia tone in particular gets overdone, and if it's overdone with skin tones, people really don't look natural. So start off with a very light touch. You can always work your way up, but it's one of those things where a little goes a long way. Now, there's some printing tips for print service providers and MyPix too. The first thing I want to point out is master your workflow. And really the core of mastering your workflow is A, get it right in the camera, and B, calibrate your display, and C, get your on-screen previews under control so that you really know what you're going to get. And start with images. If you're really starting to get into color management, I would strongly recommend that you start with images that you already know, and in fact even send in some test prints if you're working with a print service provider like MyPix. Take some images that you already know, 2 or 3 of them, have some small prints made, or work them through the Design Center, which is their editing utility online, and work with them a little bit and get a feel for how the process works ahead of time before you do an important job or an important image. You should also consider whether or not you want to have them do some of the photo editing for you. They have people available who will, for a fee, edit your photos for you, whether it's color or more strenuous Photoshop editing, I think even removing objects from a scene and things like that. But the idea, first of all, is calibrate your display, get your workflow under control. Before you send the image in, check the specs. I noticed on the website that they have pixel density specifications. They also have color space specifications. You need to check those and make sure you've got them right before you send the image in, or you're probably going to get an unexpected result. I also want you to think about trying different media types. The media types can really make a difference in your perception of the photograph. The picture on the right, the customer actually purchased that printed on what I call watercolor paper. And you can see that both of these little girls have very, very fine skin texture and very pale skin. And when it was printed on the watercolor paper, it became very painterly. The flowers in their hair and the skin tones and the rest of it all became very painterly, a little bit more like a watercolor painting. And she loved it. And so try those different media types ahead of time. Get a feel for what they're going to look like. Canvas is another big winner. I just made a big canvas print for a client. You can upcharge for that because the material costs are sometimes more. And certainly it's more work to edit for fine art paper and canvas than it is to edit for a glossy or luster paper, which is a little bit more forgiving, particularly when it comes to shadow and highlight detail. Fine art papers, generally speaking, are going to block up in the shadows a little earlier, and they're going to lose highlight detail a little bit earlier. They have slightly less dynamic range. Things have improved a lot in the last few years, but they still have slightly less dynamic range than, say, a glossy paper. So it's a good idea for you to get ahead of the game, experiment a little bit with some of these media types and know what's going to happen before you make the print when you're playing a real, you're playing the game for keeps. Now we're running a little bit ahead of schedule. That's okay. I hope all your questions are getting answered. Let's just take a look right here and see if there's any questions that I can. Well, the question is, what is a PSP? A print service provider is a service typically on the internet, but sometimes they're a local business. But a print service provider is someone who makes prints for hire. And so MyPix2 is mypix2.com. is a print service provider online, and they're full service. They will do canvas and canvas stretching onto a stretcher frame. They'll do everything for you, or you can do all the editing yourself. They have a range of media types, and I encourage you to check the website. Let's see, what are some of the other questions here? There's one question here about somebody did a calibration on, it looks like a Dell model 2410. He's not able to get better than 93% of sRGB on that device. I don't think that's a big problem. 93% is pretty good. Typically it ranges from 93 to 98. I don't know how long you've had the monitor, but sometimes an older monitor will render a little bit less of a color gamut than a newer one. It may also be the video card, but 93% to me would be acceptable, particularly for the kind of editing that we're talking about here.
Yeah, David, the Dell website, though this is no longer being sold, I noticed long ago that their description of this monitor is that it has 110% color gamut. Of course, it doesn't say what color space they mean. It wasn't a color science person who wrote that, so it's nonsense. But the indication would be it should be at least sRGB, because there are a few monitors that are 110% of Adobe RGB. So it sounds like this monitor is not working up to its expected color gamut, and there are a couple of possible reasons that include issues with how it's connected to the computer or the video card being used. Beyond that, you just need to put the colors that matter to you on the screen. The best way to do this, of course, sorry about that, is to take a spider checker and to bring up the image of it on screen and put it under a proofing light next to the screen and see what your visual match is, because that will tell you very clearly what your colors look like compared to what they should look like in other circumstances as well.
You might want to explain what a proofing light is.
Proofing light is any good continuous spectrum light source. We like 5000K lights in this industry. The textile industry like 6500K, but either of them will do a good job of illuminating a spider checker or any other standard target. So that would be the kind of light source you'd want to use if you're going to use a physical target to compare it to on screen. This trick also works with the spider checker with the cards flipped backwards to be gray cards to check the neutrality of your monitor. You bring up a neutral image in Photoshop or a similar app on screen, and you look at the gray cards next to it and see if there's a match between the tone of gray, the color of gray on the screen to the target. But it's got to be under a good light source, an aught light or a proofing light of some type, in order to be sure that you've closed the loop, taken care of all the variables.
That's a great point. A gray card, like the flip side of the spider checker, is one of the best ways to see if you have a color cast. The eye sees a color cast in a gray field faster than anything else. It adapts to white, but when there's a color cast in gray, just about everybody with normal color vision will see it immediately. And so if you've got a good light source on the spider checker and you hold that up next to your screen, you'll see the difference instantly.
It's one of the few absolutes you can use for monitor comparison, is the visual comparison of a good gray card under a good light to your display. And it's got to be quite a big gray card to do this, because it's a funny thing about your eye. You can't see color as well on a little area as you can on a big area, so you need to have something that's several inches wide in order to be able to see enough of it to get a real sense for its neutrality. So that's certainly the recommended method for checking neutrality on a display. If you're convinced you have a color cast, either through your calibration or for some part of your workflow, then use the gray cards in the color checker with a good light source. And by the way, the sun is a good light source. It's just an inconvenient one to get to shine next to your monitor. So,
yes.
Other than that, what you really want is a side-by-side comparison here. So cutting a hole in the roof is probably not a good option.
No. I'll add one last thing to this subject of evaluating colors on screen. Is that, and this comes, I've been doing a lot of work with video lately, is a lot of colorists, in other words, people in the video field who are editing video and adjusting color, look first to skin tones. So another way that you can judge what you're seeing on screen is to take a look at the people that you know and see, does it really look like them? Natural colors will also tell you something. Is the grass really green, or does it look kind of blue? And is the sky really blue, or does it look sort of green? And just checking those natural colors will give you an idea of whether maybe you need to redo your screen calibration, or if it's coming off the camera, whether or not you needed to do a better job of white balancing your camera in your ambient lighting condition. So
people often make the mistake of using their own images as test images when they think they have a problem. It's fine to use your images as test images when you don't have a problem, but when you do have a problem, go back and use the test images in our Spider software, the Spider-proof test images, because you're cutting every other color management application out of the function by doing it directly in our software. And those images have, by intent, a wide range of memory colors and neutrals and ramps built into the test images. You also have a JPEG copy of those test images tagged and in sRGB in a folder with your software. So you can open that in Photoshop. If it doesn't look the same in Photoshop as it looks in our software, then you have a problem with your color management and the way Photoshop is working. So you can also print those images for comparison. So they're a good set of memory color and universal color images to use for visual comparison as well as printing and other types of testing.
Just to elaborate on something that David said, Spider-proof is in the Spider 4 software. So for example, in Spider 4 Elite, there's a shortcut panel on the left, drop down, and if you left click on this is a screenshot, so I can't do it, but you go to Spider-proof and there's a set of 16 photographs in color and black and white that you can use to evaluate the color calibration that you just completed. And you can look at a before and after view of that. I didn't include it here to save a little bit of time. I anticipated that we would probably have a little bit of discussion at the end, and I didn't want to go over time. But the software is really quite complete. There's a number of tests that it provides for judging the quality of your display and the evenness of the display. There's Spider-proof that gives you an idea of what your screen looked like before you calibrated it and afterwards. So it's really quite complete. Okay, let's run forward. I've always liked that photograph. Okay, webinars. We record these webinars. This webinar will be available online for your review in a few days. It's at spider.datacolor.com, and you'll see a square on there you can check on for recorded webinars. Some of the previously recorded topics include focus controls and remote triggering, end-to-end color management, that's from capture to making a print, soft proofing as a separate subject, so you can really dig into that and understand it. The convergence of still and motion capture, that's an emerging thing right now and can help make you a more competitive photographer. Architectural photography. We try to focus on things that help people become better photographers. Some of the webinars that are coming up on February 26th, we have Printing Success with Fine Art and Custom Papers. And on March 13th, we have Screen to Print Match. We also have a blog. We have a half dozen leading photographers that contribute articles to the blog on a wide variety of subjects. We've got one on managing failure in compact flashcards that David Toby just wrote that was published yesterday. We have another one coming up on blending modes in layers in Photoshop. We have previous ones on basic color management and getting it right in the camera. So there's a number of blog articles from everything from very basic to very advanced. I encourage you to take a look at it. We've been accumulating articles for several years now, and it's really quite relevant and quite current. I want to thank our sponsors, Datacolor and mypix2.com. The web addresses are provided here, and again, this is being recorded, so you can pick this up, information up from the recording if you need it. We have discounts, 20% off all Spyder products purchased at spyder.datacolor.com. The discount code is indoor20. It's valid from today through February 20th in the U.S. only. MyPix is 50% off at mypix2.com plus free shipping. The discount code is FREE50DC, D as in David, C as in Charlie, valid from today through March 1st. And we have two giveaways. The Spyder Checker is being awarded to Walter Crowder, and the MyPix Canvas, it's a 20 by 30 canvas print, Erica Castaneda. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Our marketing manager will be getting in touch with you via email to make arrangements for you for delivery of these giveaways. Again, my name is David Saffir. The important thing for you to know from all of this, my blog and website, but my email address is dsaffir@mac.com. I will answer questions from my students. If you send me a question, please give me 24 hours to answer you. I'm handling a lot of email and technical support issues lately, and so if I don't answer you within 24 hours, please ping me again. That just means that I missed your email in the flood, and it's not that I'm ignoring you. David Toby has an excellent blog and website, cdtoby.wordpress.com, and his website is cdtoby.com. I thank you again for attending. I encourage you to come back and participate in our other webinars, and hope to join you soon. Have a good day.